Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello folks, welcome to the live edition of the 1% Better podcast, and what time is it around now? 20 past 8 on a Tuesday evening, or 20 past 3 p.m. In Eastern Standard Time, where my guest is this evening, and delighted to be getting the show kicked off probably a little bit later than expected, and as I said, it's one of the first times doing this properly live, so there could be some technical issues. Hopefully my guest on the other side can actually hear me. He's nodding, and that's a good sign. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Bogaczyk. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Rob, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the time.
No, it's great to have you on to the show, and I'm definitely hopeful that it's actually been audible for other people right now. But hey, at least we're recording it. I can always put it out in an on-demand podcast afterwards. So, Jeff, it was great chatting to you even before we hit off on the live button here. We both have podcasts, and we've both been sharing stories around, I guess, the enjoyment, fulfillment, and fun that we've had from them over the last year and a half or so. Where did your idea for the podcast come from?
Well, it's a great question. So for me, I guess it was about, maybe 2 years ago, where I started looking into better ways for me to learn. I'm big on education. That's something big for me. Reading is a big thing for me, and I had listened to podcasts, several years ago, but not with really much enthusiasm. And then I started, I heard one podcast by a guy. His name was Nick Loper. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he does the Smart Passive Income.
Oh, yeah.
No,
that was Pat. That's Pat Flynn. Yeah. No, that one.
He does the Side Hustle Show.
Okay.
And so I just started listening to his program, and I learned a ton. I listened to him, then I heard about Pat Flynn. I listened to Pat. I heard about John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneurs on Fire. I started listening to him. Amy Porterfield, I started listening to her. And, there's kind of this, community of people. And I just started listening to those. I wanted to learn more about digital marketing. I wanted to learn more about online business and things like that. And through that whole experience, I learned a ton. And then I thought, you know what? I think it would be great for me to do a podcast about something that I'm passionate about, which is helping people, right, to become better, to improve themselves. And, the big thing for me, my podcast is called the Mind for Life podcast. And the big thing for me is that we improve ourselves most when we look at the ways in which we think. And so for me, our perceptions of reality really affect our actual lived reality, our lived experience. And so I was like, this is important to me, and I wanted to be able to share that, and started talking with some other people, invited some guests. And as I mentioned to you, it's been a great learning experience for me. Having the opportunity to talk to other people such as yourself that are interested in the same things and that have some expertise in some areas. So it was a win-win. I felt like it was a win situation for me, and it was a win situation for my audience. So that's kind of how I got started, and what the passion was that birthed the entire thing.
I was smiling for pretty much all of that, laughing to myself almost that I was kind of saying, were you kind of reading my mind? And I've actually wrote a few blogs about my own journey and how it started, and it's pretty much identical. I'm just actually sharing something out on Facebook here just to make sure that our live stream is going out there. No, totally. I remember my first podcast that I listened to, and probably like you, I heard of these things called podcasts for a while and didn't really get the concept. And then I do a lot of running, and I used to listen to a lot of music running, but it was kind of getting a bit boring. And the podcast Stuff You Should Know, you know that one? The two guys from Atlanta?
I think I've heard of that. I can't say that I've listened to it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they've actually hit the first billion downloaded podcast since it came out. They've over 1,000 episodes, but it was those guys, and it was 40-minute podcast about a topic, and they would just talk about it. So like the Berlin Wall was the one that stands out for me, and they just explained all about it. So I would learn so much in that short space of time for my run. Generally the run wouldn't be that long, and I come back like I'd be feeling physically fitter, and my brain would be getting nourished with stuff, and it was like this is amazing, you know. And then I found 5 or 6 or others, and over the course of the next few years, kind of I think it transformed me in so many ways. I can't explain why, because even listening to, you have probably listened to Tim Ferriss a good bit, I'd imagine. Yeah. And through Tim Ferriss, he talked about meditation an awful lot to all the guests, and most of them had a meditation practice. So I took some of the tips out of that and started to do that myself, and that helped me kind of get a good foundation in just maybe figuring out an awful lot about myself, and then built on it. So yeah, I don't want to bang on all about that, but it's certainly a similar parallel, and to your point, you get to a point then you feel like you want to give something back to the podcast world and those that listen, and that's obviously what you did. So Mind for Life, that's the name of the podcast. You're 18 months or so in. At the very outset, you had a vision for what that was going to be about. Maybe talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that has always been like a question for me, or of interest, is the idea of success, personal improvement, personal development. I remember 10, 15 years ago going to hear like Zig Ziglar, and these guys talk about success, and you would go and sit in those, audiences and hear them talk about, the things that they did to be able to achieve these areas of success. And so the question for me kind of became, what exactly is success? In other words, we have this word, and we all, when we say it, we all mean something just a little bit different. We have similar ideas of what it means, but for all of us, it's a little bit different. So for me, it was like, what is that? And then what prevents so many people from achieving that in their own life? What holds us back?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my, I guess you could say, my formal education is in rhetoric. I have a PhD in rhetoric, and that deals with communication. It deals with interpersonal communication, organizational communication, and really human communication. Language is what they call a medium. It's something that comes between us and our own thoughts. And so thinking is really having a conversation with yourself. When you think, you're really speaking to yourself. And in that instance, our vocabulary is important. The words that we have, what we say, what we mean. And so, that type of thought, when I learned that, it was just kind of like, maybe we can help people by fixing some of the things that are so destructive. I heard a professor say once that our minds can only consciously be aware of 5 to 6 things per second. So, for example, there's all kind of external stimuli that's happening to our body that our brains are processing every second of every day, and we can only be consciously aware of it. That means we can only attend to it and make a decision about it. We're very limited in what we can do. So what that means is, for a lot of our life, our brains are just operating on autopilot. They're making decisions based on the way they've, quote unquote, been programmed. And I don't necessarily like to use the computer analogy when we talk about our brains, because I believe they're quite different. But our environment, our past, our histories, the people that we've met, the words that have come in, the language that we've adopted, all contributes to the way that our brains make decisions. And sometimes we make decisions and we're not even aware of them. And a lot of times, I believe, the decisions that are destructive in our life, the decisions that we make that really lead to bad outcomes are done on autopilot without us thinking based on past conditioning, if you will. And so my thought was, how can we help people to become aware of what's going on in their brain, what's going on neurologically, if you will, to enable them to then be able to make changes. So for me, like the first step in any type of self-improvement or any type of bettering of yourself is to start to become aware of and understand what's actually going on when you're making decisions, how it's happening, that it's happening for the most part beyond your conscious awareness. So becoming conscious of that and then taking, intentional steps to be able to do things different and be able to change. And so, that was basically the idea that started everything for me, was how can we help people to develop a mind for life? How can we help people to think, learn, and live a better life? And so that's kind of the, I guess you could say the shortened version of the reasoning behind what I'm doing in that podcast.
And I know before you released the podcast, you do a lot of blogging, you do a lot of writing as well. Was the topic pretty much the same of what you were writing about predominantly as well?
Yeah, in some senses it was. In other senses it was things that I'm passionate about. So some of my blogs deal with personal improvement. Some of them, probably the most popular on my blogs, have to deal with the 52 essential skills for success in life and business. So I don't know what I did, but I did something to be able to rank really high in Google for skills for success. So if you look for skills for success or skills for success in life and you Google that, my article on the 52 essential skills is up there pretty high. So that kind of was like what got me started, and that's kind of like what I enjoy writing on. I do understand the idea that our intelligence is important, but there's other skills I think that have been traditionally called the soft skills,
Yep.
How you relate to people. So I don't like the term soft skills. It sounds like, oh, they're soft, you don't really need them. And I think they're essential. And in fact, I think your success in life, and that doesn't just mean how much money you make or what kind of job you have. It means how good are your relationships with other people? How do you get along with your family, friends? How do you do well at work? The skills that are necessary for that have to do with things like how you communicate, how you are emotionally intelligent, how you are productive, how you delegate, and all of those things. So that's kind of what I enjoy writing on. And I've been in this series on the skills for success over the year, and I've kind of like taken a bit of a summer vacation here on that. But that's important to me. What can I do to help people become better? And I want to write about those things and, hopefully give some pointers or hopefully give some advice or wisdom on things that they may be able to do practically to develop those 52 skills. And there's one for each week, so we kind of work on one each week. And I'll try to get a bunch of resources on that skill and put them out there for people to be able to look at it, and then write a blog on it, do a podcast, hopefully interview an expert on one of those skills for success. So that's kind of what my blogging has entailed. And I've been fortunate to find, I wouldn't say I'm, incredibly successful, if you want to determine it that way, but for me, if I can help one person, or if somebody reads an article and says, I really enjoyed this, I consider that a success. It wouldn't be commercial success that I'm getting paid millions of dollars, or that somebody's publishing a book of mine or anything like that. But that people read my articles and say, boy, that was meaningful. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yep, I totally get it. And EQ, or emotional intelligence, something I'm very passionate about. Do coaching in my job and in what I'm hoping to continue to do. And the area of, I think it ties into what you're talking about, knowing thyself, or know yourself, right? So fully get a good grasp of who you are, probably before you can be successful, or probably able to deal with other people that well. Was there any key tip or key practice or approach that you would always talk about for folks, for them first of all to really start to figuring out who they are, what their self is all about?
Yeah, I think the first step is what I would call reflection. So let me give you an example. When things go bad in our lives, most of us are not of the type that would sit back and ask the question, why? When things go bad in our life, we don't want to look back, and we don't usually examine and go, why did that not work out? And the second part of that is most of us are more apt to blame external circumstances for the bad outcomes in our lives. So, that person did that to me, or, this person didn't do what I asked them to do. And when we and those are kind of default behaviors, we're kind of like trained to blame someone else. And I think it starts in childhood, when someone says, did you take the candy? And you say, no, he did it, or no, she did it. We're just kind of conditioned to not want to accept responsibility for the bad things that happen to us. Sometimes bad things happen and there's nothing we can do, but a lot of the negative outcomes in our life come based on negative choices that we have. So the first step is to reflect, and that's really an active endeavor. You have to sit back and ask yourself the question, why did this happen and what did I do? And then you have to really kind of start to unpack your thinking process and decisions that you made that you're probably not aware of. The way that you treated someone may have caused them to do something, and you didn't realize that you treated them in a way, or that you caused them to be defensive, or you hurt them in a way that they wanted to get back at you, or something like that, or you didn't pay them attention, or you didn't respect them, or something like that. And all of a sudden this dynamic takes place, and you start to just blame the other person. Why are they doing this to me? Why are they doing this to me? Instead of saying, what am I doing to them? How am I acting that's causing them to do that? So the first step is to find a way, and I'm going to be honest with you, Rob, I don't know that there's an easy way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a technique or something, but some people, I think, can develop the sense of curiosity that they can look inside of themselves and say, what did I do here? What did I not do here? How did I contribute to this failure? And really be willing to take responsibility for their own actions and what they did. And maybe it's not their fault in the sense that they intentionally did it, but it's something that happened as a result of the way that their brains have operated for all of their life. So let me give you an example. The way that we handle conflict in our relationships, right? Conflict is usually something that happens that results in negative outcomes if we don't handle it well. In other words, we get in fights with people, our interpersonal relationships are damaged, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we handle conflict is primarily formed by our families. So by your parents. If you grew up in a family where dad was mad, and every time dad got mad, he started slamming doors, and mom would just be like, okay, everybody keep quiet, and let's all go in our rooms and kind of like don't say anything. That's really a dysfunctional way to handle conflict. Or somebody was aggressive, or you learned to be assertive instead of learning to be collaborative or something like that. And you don't realize that you're learning to do that. It's just something that happens. And then when you get later in life, instead of allowing conflict to be a catalyst in your relationships, to move you on to greater intimacy, to better relationships, you just kind of like smooth it, or you avoid it, or you don't see anything, and then the relationship kind of stagnates. And that's just something that happens default. It's just a default based on something that you learned in the past. And so the first step there is to try to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I avoiding this? And then try to make some intentional steps. So the first step is reflection. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to do, and there's no real, I don't think there's a shortcut.
Yeah.
No, getting there.
No, definitely no shortcut. And I think what you're saying is accurate from my perspective as well, that it's a practice. You have to practice reflection. You have to practice that, taking the step back, even if it is uncomfortable, for however long, because sometimes, you know, taking that step back and seeing for things for what they really are isn't the most pleasant view, and then over time you get into it. Like everything, I think, that makes you better, it generally is a practice of day by day, week by week, to your point, like, you know, the 52 weeks in a year, and take something and work on it probably not just for a week, but for maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, till it becomes a habit. So I would totally agree with that. And it's funny, when I started doing podcasting and interviewed people, I don't think I had the belief that there was quick fixes or life hacks. I'm not too big on that term, that it, right, you know, you can shortcut and get better. You know, I'm calling it 1% better the show rather than 50% better after doing one thing, you know. So it is incremental improvements, and it's consistent that all these people that I've talked to, that have reflected, that have looked at themselves, that have studied an area and have gone through pain and suffering, and I think as an essential to get to a better place, have said, yeah, there's no shortcuts here, and, you know, don't expect that to be the case, not just for stuff in their own life, but one of the guys I interviewed early on in the podcast, he does a soccer podcast. Andrew Mangan is his name, and he has 1 million downloads a month, but he said, yeah, overnight success after 10 years, because it took that long to build it up. So, you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, you look at a lot of people. This has even been my perception. We look at people that are successful and we go, man, you know, I wish I could be there. But nobody wants to look at the 10 years. You know, nobody wants to look at the 15 years of writing before someone gets published. You know, we just think that it should happen overnight. And it was an interesting thing that you said, because you talked about, you know, the meditation aspect, even in your own journey, right? That you started to think about yourself and ask yourself that question. So that was kind of like a self-reflection, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. It is. Like, that was the kind of turning point in lots of ways, that started to take a step back, look at myself, or not. It's the kind of, to your point as well, it's like this kind of idea of the meta. It's a meta view of, you're looking at your thoughts rather than being carried away with your thoughts. And now, even thinking about this last night, I knew we were going to be talking a bit about it. And, you know, when I meditate, sometimes I kind of see myself sitting, you know, that you hear people talking about sitting by the bank of a river and watching things float by, and kind of see myself in a movie, cinema screen, or theater, and you can see stuff coming in, and, you know, it's trying to actually just detach from it, look at the thought coming across, and let it go again. Not actually in the past absolutely be caught up with frustration or anger or you know, pain or whatever that is associated with it to it. And I know I talk about this a lot, and people are probably listening hopefully will realize that it's not just to say it, it's true, but that doesn't happen. It's like a lot of people that get into meditation, after a week they just stop because it's not working, or something isn't kicking in for them. You know, it's not going to. It's just keep with it. Like, so yeah, no, I totally get it, and kind of share kind of similar views there. I'm very passionate about values as well, and I know that's something you talk about. Maybe just talk a little bit about where you see values fit in, and if there's one, like, I have a few examples when I talk with people or coach people, the importance of values, and very few people know what their own core values are, personal values, work-related values, and there's a few kind of exercises that I would do with people to try and help them think about them. Maybe talk a little bit about values and anything come up around that on exercises.
Yeah, to me, that's a big deal. I believe that, you know, integrity, when we have integrity with ourselves, we live our best lives. And what that means is that when we act out and live out what we believe, and it's not always the easiest thing to do, to be able to live out what we believe, but and I also would kind of connect that to ethics and conscience and things like that. when we act against ourselves, when we act against our conscience, when we justify our behavior, in order to get what we want or whatever, we hurt our character, we hurt our integrity. And I think that's detrimental and that's damaging. I've been reading The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I don't know if you've ever read that.
No, I heard of it.
In that book, he talks about what happens when a person lies to themselves. And there's a passage in there when he says, when you lie to yourself and you start to believe the lies that you tell yourself, there's this constant spiral downward that takes place in your life. And so to me, there's something about telling the truth, but not just telling the truth to other people, but telling the truth to ourselves. And ultimately, when we lie to someone else, we're lying to ourselves. When we're not honest with someone else, we're not honest with ourselves. And so that was really a striking passage to me about what happens when we don't tell the truth, when we lie to ourselves. And then what happens, we start to believe those things, and then we start to ultimately live those things out. So, telling the truth, honesty, ethics, I think those things are important. I think there's something, if you want to say it this way, in the universe, that when we start to go down that path or go down that road, we hurt ourselves and we hurt reality maybe to a certain extent. So that's a big deal to me. I've by no means arrived, but it's constantly, thinking about, am I lying to myself here? Am I being honest with myself? And listen, we all know that we live in a world where people are self-promoters. People say a bunch of stuff about themselves, and in all honesty, a lot of it's not true. And so for me, it's like, it's easy to point the finger at someone else and say, look at what they're doing, or look at what this person did. It's important for me to turn the finger around and point at myself. And I'm big on that. There's a verse in the Bible that says, before you take the log out of someone else's eye, take the speck out of your own. And it's easy to go pointing out logs in everyone else's eyes, and it's hard to look at and locate the speck in our own eye. Or excuse me, before the verse is, before you take the speck out of someone else's eye, take the log out of your own. And it's funny how easily we overlook logs and how quickly we can identify specks. And so I guess a principle that I try to live my life by is, let's not worry so much about anyone else. Let me really worry about myself. Let's start taking some logs out, and that's probably the best way to proceed in life.
It's funny. Again, some parallels coming up. You mentioned John Lee Dumas, and I actually interviewed him for the 864 podcast, the kind of 15-minute one I do.
Nice.
He's great with his time, and he's obviously been very successful in lots of definitions of success, for podcasting as well. And we talked about quid pro quo as something I believe in, doing something good for you and it'll come back to you or me. And we talked about, he gets a lot of probably not hate mail, probably is the right term, a lot of trolling online and whatnot, right, because he's putting out a lot of content, and I can certainly see the perspective. You see, like, the trying to sell really hard or whatever. And I asked him that question, how does he deal with that? And, I suppose he's come to the point where he doesn't actually allow it to impact him, because he can control how he feels, and
right,
whatever is coming out back at him, the problem is with that person, the haters or the naysayers or whatever. And I notice, last week even, I think I was sick last week, and it would be online, and you might flick onto Twitter and you see feeds coming in, and you see stuff coming in that doesn't seem authentic, just as trying to push something at you, and you have that reaction of like, oh, this is really, you know, bothering me or whatever. And you know, now I guess through meditation and that, creating a space of being aware of that thought, not reacting on it, taking a step back and, you know, letting it go, letting it pass away is I guess taking that log out of my own eye and not kind of, you know, having that negative response, putting negativity out there, making yourself feel bad for no reason at all. You know, you can control how you feel, whereas others probably we can't control what they do. So it kind of parallels to a little bit what you were saying there. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Viktor Frankl, yeah, I love it.
So, you know, that story to me, his story from that book is just like, you know, that's kind of like a foundation, rock foundation for how I try to live. And, you know, the point that he makes in there that, you know, there other people can control a lot of things about what happens in our life, but they can't control our response to how those things take place. And we can choose in every circumstance, if we want to respond positively, to take responsibility, and to act with integrity. It's not always easy, and there's a lot of people that are quick to play the victim card and to blame someone else and to, you know, lash out when the haters hate, to hate back. You know, I give John Lee Dumas a lot of credit for saying, look, those people I'm gonna respond positively when those things come. And there's, you know, not that I've had a lot of, you know, trolling or anything like that. You know, I'm nowhere near at the level that he is when it comes to probably that type of success, if you want to call it that. But I've had people that have said bad things to me on Twitter, and usually I just will say, hey, I apologize, you know, no, I'm not trying to offend you, and, you know, try to react positively. And, you know, some guy got on there and just, you know, one time was just like ranting and raving about me, and I just kind of said, hey, I'm sorry, you know, that wasn't my intention. I apologize you felt that way. And the guy basically came back and said, sorry, man, I was having a bad day. You know, and so you don't know what other people are going through, you know. And so if you respond positively, I think it's easy to respond. It's easy to respond hate for hate. It's easy to do that. It doesn't take anybody when someone hates on you to hate on them back. I mean, that's the easiest, lowest level of response, right? The high character is to say, let me respond with character. Let me respond with integrity. Let me be responsible for me and not allow someone else. In the communication literature, what they say it like is, I am not going to allow someone else to dictate my agenda, my communication agenda. And so some people play those tricks in negotiations or in conflict situations. They will attack and they will, you know, straw man arguments and things like that in order to get you off of your agenda. And so you just can't play those games. You have to respond with integrity. And, you know, Viktor Frankl to me is like, you know, a shining example, because let's be honest, for the most part, we're not sitting not too many of us are sitting in Nazi concentration camps, right?
Yeah.
We're not in those situations. Now, there are some people in the world who are, and, you know, we need to do everything we can to eliminate that. But for most of us, we don't have that life, and we've got it pretty good. So I think we can respond positively, and that's kind of the choices that I choose to make, and they've been beneficial.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And again, numerous times the Viktor E. Frankl book has come up. I actually, an episode I'm releasing in a couple of weeks, again, big into meditation. Have you heard of David G? He's a meditation guy on the West Coast. Write him down. He's an interesting character, and he talks about the sweet spot in the universe and the gap, and it's again a meditation kind of element. He actually worked for Deepak Chopra for a number of years in his center, okay. And his book recommendation was Man's Search for Meaning as well, along similar lines. Just interested, you obviously worked in the communications realm with the rhetoric, the PhD, and you've worked with leaders, and I suppose leadership, is that an area you've kind of had exposure to?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
When you look at your 52 characteristics or principles over the course of the year and working with leaders, I suppose what are the typical gaps you see in the leaders you've worked with? Does it go back to them knowing themselves, or what? I suppose what are kind of key areas around leadership that you've focused on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had an opportunity to interview Lolly Daskell. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author.
Okay.
She's one of the top executive coaches, C-suite executive coaches. She wrote her book is called The Leadership Gap.
Okay.
And really, her entire book is about leaders developing self-awareness. And basically, she goes back to the same thing that you just mentioned, know thyself. And leaders, the biggest thing that they can do to improve their leadership is to understand their gaps, understand where they lack. And I personally believe that the most important skills for leaders are people skills.
Mm-hmm.
You as a leader, you need to know, because what is your job as a leader? Granted, you've got to forecast. Granted, you've got to be a visionary. But the fact of the matter is, as a leader, the definition of the term is that people are following you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's that old quote. It's something to the effect of, "He who thinks he's leading and has no followers is just simply out taking a walk." So like learning how to deal with people, how to help people to improve, what motivates people, how to communicate effectively with people, how to deal with conflict. Those are, I think, the most important skills when it comes to leadership. And usually that's kind of where leaders fail. I mean, they'll, in my opinion, when I say fail, I think when you fail with your followers, when you fail with your team, I think you failed. You might say, "Oh, we did this for the organization," or "We got this much profit today because I was on top of everybody." But if everybody hates working for you, if no one wants to be a part of the organization, if everyone just, that you talk about, here's a perfect example. You talk about, Jeff Bezos,
Mm-hmm.
right? Amazon.com. What a great leader, they say. What a great visionary. And in all honesty, how it's hard to argue with, he's the richest person on the planet right now, and Amazon has taken the world by storm, and nobody buys in shopping centers. But nobody likes working there.
Yeah. I don't work there, but I've heard stories. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you read the stories that come out of what a disaster it is, and it's like a sweatshop, and you don't get a good chance to go to the bathroom, and there, it's like, if everybody's running away from the culture and running away from the organization, have you really been successful? I mean, granted, yeah, your stock's up there and you're billions and billions of dollars. I don't know. I guess you can balance that out. But to me, if your followers don't want to follow you, it says that you're not much of a leader. And so, to me, the character, the integrity, that all goes to leadership. I interviewed another gentleman who wrote a book called Lead from the Heart. His name was Mark Crowley. And he talks about a heart-based leadership, and not heart in the soft sense, but that we've got to be concerned with people. So I think the best thing that you can do to improve your leadership is to improve your communication skills. If you can communicate publicly, so there's three aspects that I would say. Number one, you've got to learn how to communicate with yourself. Okay, that's intrapersonal communication. Mm-hmm. That's what are the messages you're giving to yourself? What are the thoughts that you're speaking to yourself? What's going on in the background of your mind that you're not aware of, and correcting that. So you've got to have good intrapersonal communication. You've got to be able to think right. Number two, you've got to have good interpersonal communication skills. That means how you deal with people, how you talk to people, how you respect other people, how you listen to them and value them and make them important. And then the third aspect is your public communication, your mass communication. How do you how do you inspire others? How do you share vision for your organization? How do you get up in front and motivate people and cast a vision of the future that people want to be a part of? So, if you can improve those three communications by 1%, right? The 1% Better podcast, I think you would 50% jump your leadership. A 1% jump in each of those doesn't equal 3%. It equals about a 50% jump in your leadership ability. So that's important.
Yeah, three really good points there. I know we're probably gone way over what we expected, but that's all good. Good conversation. The one thing that comes up for me is leadership. All of that is extremely important. But if you haven't got an authentic leader, that you can see when somebody's being authentic and when it's not. I would hope you probably can. I don't know if everybody can, but how does a leader become authentic, or how can they work on that? Can they?
The authenticity, I think, is just an outgrowth of who you are as a person. So, and usually authenticity shows itself in how you treat other people. People will say you're non-authentic. What do we say when we look at someone and go, they're not authentic? It's usually because they dismissed us. They didn't value us as a person, right? They looked at us, they said a couple of words, and then they turned away, and we go, they're not real genuine. So the key to authenticity, in my opinion, is how you treat each and every person that you encounter throughout the day. Do you treat them as a person? So one of the philosophers, he was a phenomenological philosopher. His name was Martin Buber. And his big deal was these two primary words by which we refer to other individuals and things in our life. And there's the idea of the I, it, in which we are the I and everything else around us is an it or an object. And then there is the I and thou, where I am a person and you are an authentic thou, another person. And we easily adopt into this I-it mode of thinking, where I'm the center of the universe. Everything revolves around me, and you're just an object that's kind of like revolving in my universe. And if we treat people as its, as objects in that mode of thinking, I-it, if we treat people that way, we come off as inauthentic. We come off as not real genuine. But when we treat people as authentic thous, and it's really about how I treat you, Rob. Are you a real person? Do you have things that are important to you that I can, empathize with and think about and talk to you about? If I treat you that way as an authentic person, then I come off as authentic. And so really it's about how you encounter people in your life. And everybody knows a fake leader. When that person comes in the room, they shake their hand and they're on to the next hand. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But some people have the uncanny ability to, in 5 minutes, and they would say, you would say this about the great leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They would look you in the face and they would make you feel like you're the most important person in their universe at that time. And it's not a technique. It's not a trick, because we can detect, as human beings, we can detect when someone's just doing that as a technique. But when someone really is interested in us and they come off as authentic. And I think that's about how we relate to other people. Are we in that I thou mode where we consider other people as authentic individuals with value, that are important, that have a life, that has something to share, or are they just objects floating around in our universe and we treat them that way? And so how can a leader be authentic? I think it's in how you treat other people around you. Do you treat them as authentic? Do you consider them as authentic thous? Or are they just objects that are doing things in your universe? And if they are objects, you're going to be inauthentic, because people are going to sense that you just treat me as an object. I'm an it to you. I'm not an actual person. So, that to me would be, if you want to be authentic, it really is how you care about people and how you treat them. So there's I don't know if you've ever read C.S. Lewis or heard of C.S.
I've
Lewis or
heard,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis believed that his beliefs were Orthodox Christianity, and he believed in Christianity you believe that the only thing that is eternal, that lasts beyond life, is the human soul. And so what C.S. Lewis said was, uh, the glory of a human being is that no matter who they are, their soul will last for eternity. And there's a deep value in thinking of people that way. We don't like to think of people that way, but if we thought of people as that incredibly valuable, in the same way that he did, that to say that look, everything around us, if you want to go down that road, everything around us, our organizations, our businesses, whatever it may be, it's all going to go away, but this person is so valuable, they're going to last forever. If we could put that kind of value on people,
Mm.
it would help us to treat them the way that they should be treated. And I think that's kind of the sense that you get from Buber when he talks, Martin Buber, when he talks about treating people as an authentic thou, that there's a person, that there's a weight, there's a value, there's a deep-seated importance in that person's personhood, in their humanity. If you treat people that way, you'll be authentic, no question about it.
Mm. Yeah, lots of good stuff there, Jeff. I think the way we're conditioned, for the most part, gets us off to a bad start in lots of ways, doesn't it? Really, that we're, for the most part, the masses are conditioned in one way of thinking, and people start breaking out bit by bit, I suppose. And some of the people you've mentioned there, obviously, are those that are able to take a step back and think about things a little bit differently, and feel a little bit differently about things as well. You've given me a lot of books to add to the list, and references. You've obviously, through your studies, through doing the PhD, I guess you've read so broadly and deeply about so many topics. It must have been a very fascinating journey, and obviously as a lifelong learner you're constantly doing that. I think there's been so much good stuff, Jeff, there. I'm conscious of time. I don't want to drag it out too long. I will say we touched on values, leadership, success, thinking, meditation. I know you're quite a religious person as well. How does meditation and religion, or like I've often asked other folks about meditation versus prayer, how do you see those two kind of, are they the same, or is there much difference, do you think, in them?
Yeah, I think of meditation as really a focusing of your thoughts. And I'm a big believer in meditation, in the sense that it allows you to focus your thoughts on something other than yourself. One of the things about humanity, I think, is that we're selfish. And in fact, I've learned a lot of lessons from reading the Brothers Karamazov, so I would highly recommend it. But one of the things that I've learned, and I kind of was reading through it, and I came up with this idea, and I'm sure someone else has thought of it, but everything, in our human life is really about power. How can we get power? How can we maintain power? We have this in our personal relationships, that we try to. And really, this is what rhetoric is. Rhetoric is employing speech to persuade people to do things that we want them to do, right? It's really a power play, if you want to think of it that way, that we say things, that we talk in a certain way. And Aristotle said, rhetoric is, employing the best available means of persuasion for whatever it is that you may be trying to do, So, but persuasion is really boiling down to power. It's about how we get people to do, how we reimage or reimagine or rewrite the world in our own image, and rewrite other people in our own image. And we're all selfish. So for me, meditation and prayer is an opportunity to take the eyes off of myself and put them on something that has way more importance, that is of a higher level of value. And I think that's a big deal. For me, we live in this world where we've got to a certain extent, promote ourselves, and we've got to do things. And, there's someone who said, pretty much, I just want to do my work and think about other people more. And, so meditation is a way to kind of step outside of this cat and mouse game, this power play game that we have to play while we're living in this world. And it's a way to really focus my thoughts on something that is of greater value and of higher importance to me than what's going on. And I know everybody maybe doesn't agree with that, or maybe people will say the only thing that matters is what's going on in this world. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's fine. So you can meditate and you can do the same thing for what's going on here, but to step outside, to kind of stop the rat race for a little bit, to focus on something that's more important. I think everybody needs that, regardless of your religious perspective. So, meditation and prayer is important. And, there's another line in the Brothers Karamazov, and I apologize, I'm just using that book all the time, but I'm like reading through it as we speak.
Who's the actual author again of that? Did you say it was
Dostoevsky?
Dostoevsky, yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. But in there he says, it's easy to be charitable to humanity in general. We all want to be charitable to humanity in general, but it's a lot more difficult to be charitable to the human being that you have to live with every day. To the other individual people in your life that get on your nerves every day. It's one thing to say, I want to help humanity, I want to help people. It's another thing to say, I have to put up with this person that I have to live with at work every day. It's not so easy to do it particularly. It's easy to do it in general. And so meditation, prayer, spirituality to me is about dealing with the things that are more difficult, and in fact getting to the reality of what life is all about. How do we treat the people around us? How do we live in good relationship with other people? That I think is of great import. And you mentioned that how much hate is out there in our world today. How do we combat that? How do we stop that? I mean, it's destroying our culture. It's destroying our society. It's destroying our civilization. And the way that we do that, in my opinion, is we talk with individuals. We enter into dialogues. It's a communication event, if you will. And it's more about me listening to you and hearing what you have to say and what you'd have to think, rather than me telling you what I have to think. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. No one wants to really listen to someone else. And so that's kind of an upside down, a backwards perspective, I think, but that to me is kind of like an important and a good way to live.
Yeah, no, I've definitely, one of the things I've taken the most out of coaching journey, going through all that, is the importance of listening, and how how important it is for somebody to be heard, and it's an element of communication, and it can make such a big difference. When you coach somebody for the first time, they talk maybe for 90% of the session, and they leave feeling so much better, even though you've done very little.
Right.
The hard work starts after that, but it's good to give somebody that space to just listen. So brilliant. Look, I'm gonna wrap it there, Jeff. As always, as us podcasters do at the end of a show, give yourself a shout out, how people can get in touch and how they can listen to your show, because you've had some amazing guests over the season so far. So it'd be great for them to check it out.
Yes, sure, and appreciate that. It's mindforlife.org. It's the Mind for Life podcast. You can find it on iTunes. If you search on Google Skills for Success, you'll see my article, The 52 Essential Skills for Success in Life and Business. And you can always download. There's a skills assessment that you can download, and kind of like it's really a practice in your own self-awareness of kind of like asking yourself, where do I stand in these 52 skills, and give you an idea, and you can pass that on to someone else. So print out as many copies as you want, and so that you could connect with me through that, and then that will be wonderful.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. So this is out. So hopefully somebody's listening to it right now. But if not, if they listen to the on-demand piece or the episode that'll go up on iTunes over the next few hours, that's when I suppose most people will get it. It'll download for those that have subscribed. So yeah, it's thanks for being my first live guest on the 1% Better Life.
I feel very honored, to be honest with you. The first live guest.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you inviting me on the program. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. No, thanks so much. I will let you get back to your day, and I'll do a little wrap up of what's coming for the rest of the week on this expedition of podcasting that I'm doing. Jeff, it was great to chat. Hopefully we'll stay in touch, and
please do.
Yeah, we definitely will be in touch on Twitter. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, take care.
Good luck. All right, so let me just wrap up the show, and I'll say goodbye to Jeff, and hopefully, folks, that you're still listening and you enjoyed that conversation. Just a few quick ones. The 864 podcast, which I was talking about, mentioned a couple of times. There's a new episode out in the morning with Niall Kelly. Niall Kelly is the MD of a company called Try the Trend, an Irish-based company, and we talk about his journey so far in that. Some good insights from him being an entrepreneur, some learning so far, so certainly worth checking out. What else? The podcast is now not only on iTunes and Google Podcasts, but it's also on Spotify, which is a new addition to that platform, and I'm happy to say that's there, and that will be, all new episodes will go up there. I'm aiming to release a 1% Better podcast on Friday, the once a week show. This new live episode will probably happen maybe on Tuesdays, Mondays, whenever, but hopefully it'll go down well. But there's an episode out on Friday with a lady I interviewed a while back and had been waiting to put the show out. Her name is Paula Toots, but her nickname is Paz, and she's a lady that has a large following on social media. She's had a very varied career, from journalism to executive producing to working in human rights and social media in the latter stages of her career, and she's still only around 40, so lots of insights from her. So that'll go out on Friday, and I actually have that episode and 2 others recorded and up on the Patreon site. If you're interested in checking them out, you can subscribe to the Patreon site there and listen to the next couple of episodes that will come out over the next few weeks. It just gives you that early insight, early listen, if that's something you might be interested in. The website, robofthegreen.ie, for those of you listening that mightn't have listened to a show before, that's where everything is really. The blogs, videos around 1 Minute Monday, and the podcasts. And there's a page there called the book page where I put in recommended books from previous episodes from guests. So that's growing all the time. And if I listen back to this episode with Jeff, there's probably going to be another 5 or 6 ones there. Maybe I'll just post them up. But yeah, Jeff is an interesting guy. I hope you enjoyed that. Lots of interesting quotes and learnings from his own journey. Follow the Facebook page, join the group there, 1% Better community, trying to get folks to communicate and share their own ideas and learnings and lessons there. That would be good. And there's the newsletter, all of that stuff. I don't do a full intro on the 1% Better show on a Friday anymore. This will happen more so on these live shows. I think it's easier for me, definitely for me, maybe not for you. I don't know, you can listen to this or get more straight into the episodes. So I'm going to close out. Follow on Spreaker so you hear these live shows when they're streamed out, and you'll get notified when they go out. We'll put a tweet out and a Facebook update as well. Follow on Instagram. It's on Rob of the Green there as well. all of that sort of good stuff. So I'm going to play it out. I'm going to try and play some underlying music here, because I'm not really I don't have any production. So yeah, look, hopefully you enjoyed the episode with Jeff. It was longer, but full of useful information, I believe, and I will leave it there. So hopefully you have a good night or a good rest of week, and you enjoyed this live 1% Better show, and know that it's going to get better over time as well. So thanks again, and take care.